Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here at 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning on the invitation of Peter to join you to talk about his brief movement. That was a bit of a challenge as well. And so I thought I would put together some ideas about movement. I work at a company called Round Europe as part of the transport team, Transport and Infrastructure. And Round Europe's a not-for-profit policy research organisation. When I started to think about movement, I suppose the thing that I most thought about was lack of movement, or the key limiting factor to movement in Cambridge, which is around congestion. And as I see it, the biggest problem to movement in Cambridge lies in the problem of congestion. And of course, we mustn't forget that while we have congestion, or congestion is a consequence of the economic prosperity of what we've enjoyed in Cambridge. And so it's a balance of getting the balance between movement and economic prosperity. And we have not only congestion on roads leading to Cambridge, but we have congestion in Cambridge itself, both for cars, buses which share the same road space, but also I think what might be slightly rare in Cambridge is I would argue that we almost have congestion on bikeways as well. So as I said, the challenge as I saw it was that how can we balance the need for movement whilst retaining this special environment? And I'm not going to come here today with the solution, I'm afraid, but I just wanted to put some ideas forward, and I certainly welcome discussing them with other people today and adding to the list. So I came up with a range of possible suggestions. The first, I think, is really quite an obvious one, about encouraging people to walk and cycle when feasible. And fewer cars means that cycling and walking are more attractive and safer, and you can have this virtual cycle, if you like, of increased cycling as a result of reduced amount of car travel. Plus it's good for your health and the environment. And I think Cambridge could say, actually, we're quite good on this sort of factor in the UK. Nearly a third of people go to work by bicycle in Cambridge. That's quite good. But if you compare ourselves, say, to Amsterdam or the Netherlands or Copenhagen, where nearly 60% of the people go to work by bicycle, I'd say that we might think we still have a bit of work to do, and that we could make some improvements, and that we can learn from some of these other cities about how they've done that, which is a mixture, I think, of shared spaces and corridors which can get people to where they want to go. So that might be the first area we might think about. Secondly is to encourage people to use public transport. But the difficulty here, as I mentioned earlier, is that on the whole, buses share road space with cars. It makes the buses incredibly unreliable because of congestion. We need a system that's more reliable, that's convenient, that's comfortable, and affordable, and environmentally friendly. People have ideas about the most efficient way to get people is to get them, using systems that involve interchanges. In general, people really don't like making interchanges. But I think if you can think about design and making those places where people are interchanging, making them easy, nice places to be, sitting on nice furniture, under nice trees, having a nice cup of coffee, that might make a difference. Importantly, I would add to the list about movement, about the question about whether people actually need to travel at all, or maybe whether they could travel at a different time. So one of the questions when we're thinking about movement should we be investing more in broadband services? Could we get some people to work occasionally at home, more people to work occasionally at home? I just saw the statistics on telecommuting from the National Travel Survey, and there has been quite an increase in telecommuting, working from home occasionally, and all of that helps in terms of managing the road space. But I think we could do better. And the question is, well, what do we need to do better? Is it about broadband services? What do companies need from employees who are working from home? What do employees who are working at home need to work more at home? Who are those employees? What can we put in place to encourage that? I'd also ask the question, for people who are doing online shopping, could we be delivering food, could we be delivering goods in a more environmentally friendly and efficient way? I'm sure the answer to that is yes. And shouldn't we be doing that? I think that sustainable transport options should be the top of the list when we're considering building new spaces, that the linkage between land use and transport is incredibly important, and how we design what the land is going to look like is going to have a big influence on the transport. We should be thinking about those things. You might even take it a step further and say, when we're thinking about policy, we should be thinking about transport implications. If you were to think about the policy of centralized healthcare services, when you're thinking about school choice, all of these things have an influence on transport, and we should be thinking about those implications when we're thinking about policy more generally. My rather short list on providing other transport options, which, as I say, I welcome you to add to today, but I think that we should make sure that we provide lots of options for people to think about when they're making their movement or transport choices. More thinking about shared vehicles, whether they be cars, whether they be bikes, whether those cars be electric cars. So allowing people more choice to choose more sustainable solutions. Freight, I think something that we don't think about nearly enough, and particularly in urban areas. How do we get the goods that businesses need in central Cambridge to them more sustainably, more efficiently? Do they have to come during the day? Can they come through the night? Is there other ways that we could be using the road space to allow different sorts of patterns of movement? And lastly, and perhaps rather controversially, but I think we ought to be thinking about it on our list of potential options, is should we be charging people to drive in the central of Cambridge to manage demand? Other cities have really successfully introduced road using charges that have been able to manage demand. London, obviously one of the first. Stockholm following on behind. And the thing about charging people to do things, it's like plastic bags. You charge people 5p for a plastic bag, and guess what? They use them less often. You charge people explicitly to drive in central Cambridge, and they will drive less. And in London, it's been proven that it's the single most important policy that's been able to be introduced to reduce congestion. Of course, it's really, people don't like paying money for things that they didn't pay for before, but we're talking about the environment. We're talking about the place that we want to live, and I would add it on the list. And of course, the revenues that you get from a road using charging system could be used to improve other travel options for those people who aren't driving, to mean that everyone could benefit from the money raised from a road user charging system. What about new technologies? Some people say, new technologies, they will solve some of these problems for us. And this is a picture of an autonomous vehicle. So a vehicle that will sense its surrounding and make decisions about, it will drive for you. The idea, when we're talking about the most autonomous of autonomous vehicles, is that people could sit in the car, put their feet up, and be driven to wherever they want to go. And of course, these vehicles, autonomous vehicles, could bring many societal benefits. They could reduce road traffic accidents substantially. So 90% of road traffic accidents are currently caused by human error. It's believed that machines will be much better drivers than we will. They'll never be distracted. They'll drink less. They'll probably drive the speed limit. And so traffic accidents will reduce substantially. They'll offer accessibility to people who have very limited transport options, which could be really important. Elderly people, disabled people, allowing social interaction and allowing them to get to the places that they want to go. That must be a good thing. I think that they will actually support the opportunity to share vehicles more sensibly. So if you could sit at your home and call the car that you need, and it just zipped up and took you to where you wanted to go, it would allow everyone to use more efficient vehicles. You could, if you were just doing that monthly shop, you needed to go to Sainsbury's, you could use the electric car. If you were going somewhere else in Cambridge, you could use an electric car. If you were going to visit your parents-in-law near Bath, like I might do occasionally, you could use a different sort of car. Everyone could use the car that's the most efficient vehicle for that journey, which would have a big impact on the environment. And I think the problem with the range problems with electric cars is that they don't work for all journeys, and therefore most people actually can't have one unless they have other options for different sorts of journeys. So I think autonomous vehicles could really help in that area. But I think that they also could bring negative impacts, and particularly around congestion. Because you could now imagine that a world where, I'm nearly done, a world where not only are cars now full of humans, but now they might be empty, whizzing around trying to pick people up. So in terms of the congestion problem, which I think is the biggest problem here in Cambridge, I don't see that these cars are going to solve the problem. Thinking a bit about shared spaces, I think that's also a problem, because these cars, in theory, will sense their surrounding and they will stop. And there'll be a lot of pressure for people saying we need to segregate these fantastic new vehicles away from people. And I think that people will need to be thinking about what do we want our shared spaces to look like. And as I say, so let's start thinking about how we might integrate these sorts of vehicles in a place like Cambridge. Also, how do we pay for these new options? As the question raised earlier, should we be investing in better broadband services or better bus services? And can these services run without subsidy? And if not, who's going to pay for it? And again, I would come back to the question, is this another reason to think about road user charging? Or perhaps changes in taxation? So finally, so in less than my 15 minutes, I guess if we think about the range of stakeholders who are interested in transport in Cambridge, it will be the residents, the businesses, retail sector, governance, and I think a lot of people have different roles in getting the balance between movement, the place that we want to live, what we want it to look like, and economic prosperity. And I really look forward to the discussions today. So thank you.